colleagues and listeners, another lovely podcast coming your way, and I'm very pleased to have a guest who represents an organisation that I've got great interest in, and it fascinates me from when I was a youngster and still to this day. So the person I'm talking about is Jürgen Greil, and he's the CEO of FlyNow Aviation. So Jürgen, lovely to have you with us. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Lovely, me too. Now, just to kick start, and for everybody that's listening, just give us a quick background of what FlyNow Aviation is all about and how you've come to be where you are now today.
So FlyNow Aviation is based in Salzburg, Austria, and we have founded the company in 2019 after I realized, spending many years in the automotive industry, that many, or actually almost all of our competitors in the 3D mobility business are focusing on the premium market. And so they are actually excluding at least 95% of the people, just as the automotive industry did with electric cars, because they're also focusing on the premium cars only, and most of the people are just not able to afford them. And just like, with cars, it was Ford with the Model T, and a little later Volkswagen with the Beetle, who by the design and the concept of the car and being able to industrialize them, brought production costs down to such a level that the broad public was actually able to afford them. Yeah. And that's our USP. We are working on a concept which is really like the Model T of the sky, getting the cost down to such a level that pretty much everyone who can afford a ticket for public transport or a taxi ride can also afford a flight.
Yeah. That's one of the taglines that I liked when I went through the website, where it's got a very clear, affordable for everyone. So that's a great ambition. Now, if we can just explain now exactly what the product is and how the vehicle works. Should I say vehicle or aircraft?
Well, it's an aircraft, of course. We call it Ecopter.
Yep.
Because it's derived from a helicopter. We consider helicopter as tools, but they are just, too big and way too expensive and too complicated. So what we try to do is, by electrification of the drivetrain, to get the complexity out without sacrificing the ability to control the 60 degrees of freedom in space, right? So and that's why we call it Ecopter. We are by definition not a drone. Yeah, because you have to have at least 3 propellers producing vertical lift, which has one very big advantage. We can rely on existing regulations concerning certification. So we are, looking into CS27, like helicopters certification rules, or CSVLR for very light rotorcraft, since our aircraft has a maximum takeoff weight of less than 600 kilos. So this gives us a head start, because we are mitigating a lot of risks associated with certification. And the principle is quite simple. We have a coaxial rotor system sitting on top of a cabin. Yeah. And the whole drivetrain is mounted on a gimbal joint, which is controlled by 2 actuators, which can pull and push the whole drivetrain. So that you can control roll and pitch. Yaw is controlled by changing the torque of the 2 counter-rotating propellers and the electric motors associated with it. And by increasing and decreasing rotor RPM, you can climb and descend. And that's pretty much the simplest form of how to control the 6 degrees of freedom. And the whole thing is sitting on top of the cabin. We have a modular family for a single and a twin-seater for passengers, and a cargo version for the size of a Euro pellet and 200 kilograms of payload.
And you just answered my next question, because I was just going to say it fits a Euro pallet completely, doesn't it? It slides straight in from the front and then out the back, which is obviously nice and convenient. And that can take up to 200 kilos, correct?
Exactly. So, pretty much all of the necessities on a daily basis can be transported. The volume is 1 cubic meter, and you can transport from food or medicine all the way to dishwasher or a washing machine or whatever with it.
No, that's great. And can I ask you, well, just before I do that, I always laugh when I go into a lift, whether it's in a hotel, an airport, or anywhere, and especially the Otis signs, it says maximum of 12 people, and then it gives a weight. And I look around, I think, if there was 12 of me in there, there's absolutely no way the lift would go up and down. But I'm pleased that you're able to cater for at least my weight on the Ecopter. But now the other thing, what you were saying there about about what it can and can't do, as far as with the cargo being concerned, how close can it get to somewhere that's made an order, or does it have to be at specific vertipads or vertiports network locations? Can it actually, can it come down in a designated area, provided there's certain criteria that's met?
Well, this depends not so much on the aircraft. We have a diameter of 5.4 meters, and usually the law says that you have to have at least 5 meters distance, so that you can, if you land in a confined area, it would be roughly about 15 by 15 meters. So where you technically can land. Now, in different countries, there's different laws, like in Europe, in Italy, or in the Czech Republic, you can land pretty much everywhere as long as the landowner allows you to do so.
Right.
And then there's other countries where you are actually forced to land on designated, airports. So, we are now in the business for 5 years. I've been talking to a lot of different countries and a lot of different, companies, potential operators, but also aviation authorities. And it's amazing how different the countries approach this problem. One very open-minded, and then others are rather conservative. But there are countries out there who are suffering a lot from ground-based traffic, right? They are spending hours and hours every day in a traffic jam, and so there is quite a lot of interest, also especially for the cargo version, to supply all kinds of goods to areas which are hard to reach by road.
Yeah, exactly. Now the other thing that I wanted to ask you, okay, is you've got a lot of detail and data, and I love your FAQs and the USPs. So the USPs is, you mentioned, I'll just fly through them quickly: low cost, high energy efficiency, low noise emission levels, great operability, and certification readiness. I mean, that seems to answer or tick box nearly everything that's necessary. And then when you look at the you look at the news media that you've covered, you've got some great partnerships as well. So you've got partnership with MEBA, the battery systems, and the urban air mobility focus there. Can you just explain a little bit of how you choose, or how you chose your key partners with this particular program?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I've been working in the automotive industry and also in the aerospace industry, and what I realized is that in the automotive industry, they really know how to industrialize things, right? Because they make huge quantities, and the engineers, they are smart in the automotive as well as in the aerospace industry, but the automotive industry engineers have a very cost efficient mindset.
Yeah.
Everything they do, it has to be cost efficient, and this is essential if you really want to bring 3D mobility to the masses. As I said, and applying the processes from the automotive industry, of course, you also have to have a concept which you actually can really industrialize. So we are not talking about a couple of dozens or 100 aircraft a year, but this has to go into the thousands.
Yes.
And so we tried to find companies which, on the one hand, were open to new forms of mobility inside the automotive industry, realizing that 3D mobility is actually going to be a new market for them also, on the one hand. And on the other, we're willing to talk to a small company like us, knowing that, we do, of course, don't have a structure like a big company, right? So
Yeah.
it's always very important to find the right people so that you actually are able to talk to them on the same level, even
Yeah.
though the supplier is a lot bigger than the OEM as what we are going to be, right?
Correct.
And so, our expertise at FlyNow Aviation is, of course, total vehicle architecture and the associated project management, aerodynamics, avionics, and also software. But we are not going to produce the different components ourselves, because there is, companies out there who know how to do this much better than we do. So we are not, and this is probably also something where we are differentiating ourselves from most of our competitors, not trying to do everything ourselves, or as it is now said, having the full vertical, right? Just
Exactly.
like automotive industry, they do stuff themselves, but they also get a lot of components from different suppliers, because it just makes a lot more sense to do this. And that's exactly what we are aiming for. And so we have been looking from the very beginning for companies who realize the potential of 3D mobility, who are open-minded, who also see that this is also to the advantage for them. And they apply their know-how and knowledge and the processes necessary to, produce these components at the right quantity, at the right quality, weight, and of course also the cost.
Exactly. No, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Why recreate a wheel that somebody else has absolutely mastered? Now, again, another partnership which I was quite interested to read up on, and excuse my pronunciation, but is it Simi or Simi Derby Motors from Singapore?
Yeah, Sime Darby. Yeah, that's
Fine.
also actually they are an importer of European car brands in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So they are sitting in Malaysia, and they are covering pretty much all countries in Southeast Asia, including also, I think, Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that's also very important to us, because setting up a purchase and a sales system, of course, is extremely difficult. And having such a company, of course, is a very good opportunity, and to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I imagine that they've obviously got interest because they also work in the car rental sector. So they see this as an opportunity moving forward in that region.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's to the advantage of everybody involved.
Yep, no, brilliantly. And then another one, and this is the one because of the coincidence with the name obviously we represent, which is EVA International, but you've also got a partnership announcement with EVA with regard to the drone docking stations.
Exactly. So, or vertiports, how they call them. Yeah, as I said before, if you want to set up a full ecosystem, which you need, of course, the vertiports are a very important part, because you have to have some places where you can land, and they have a lot of different solutions for larger or for smaller vertiports. And EVA is one of our partner companies.
Yeah, no, and the one the example that I've seen where they land on the top, and obviously I'm assuming you've got all the facilities underneath, for the check-in preparation, etc. So I mean, it looks really good. It reminds me of when you as a youngster you see these films and the comics, and you think, my God, you're so excited because you never realise that something like that can actually come into reality, and then here it is. It's absolutely incredible. I think the future is going to be so exciting. Bit crazy, but so exciting.
Well, concerning craziness, if you think that all over the world, 9 out of 10 cars, usually there is only one person sitting in it, right? And the car is getting bigger and heavier, and especially battery electric cars, they push the weight for another 300 to 500 kilos. And we are now talking, an average weight of pretty much close to 2 tons, just for one person, right? It takes so much resources to build these cars, and even a lot more for the necessary infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, all of this. So that actually, if you think about it, that's crazy, right? And if you do, quick calculation, on average, a car goes between 35 to 40 kilometers a day.
Yep.
Now, in our business case, we say, okay, we'd fly 5 hours at an average speed, including landing and starting, of about 80 kilometers an hour, gives you 5 times 80, 400 kilometers. So if you count the passenger kilometers, it would be one of our aircraft could substitute 10 cars. 10 cars, each weighing about 2 tons. That's 20 tons of resources in comparison to our two-seater, which is about 350 kilos. So there's a huge difference in the amount of resources needed to transport the same amount of people.
It's amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. So from that
that's
perspective,
one thing. The second, excuse me for interrupting, but the second is the infrastructure, right? Countries, especially big countries, they have a lot of trouble getting all the necessary resources to build all these roads. It takes so much concrete and steel and everything needed to build them. And by flying, it's air, and you only need a very small fraction for building these vertiports. So this is also from a country point of view, from a government point of view, very interesting, especially in countries where they are drowning in traffic on the ground. And that's why Southeast Asia, but also India, and of course the MENA region. We were 3 weeks ago at LEAP and at this fair. And what I've learned, Riyadh grew from last year to this year by 1 million. There were 8 million last year. Now there are 9 million inhabitants. Every Riyadhi spends 1 month each year in a traffic jam.
Yep.
It's just crazy, right? And so they are also, looking for alternatives.
Exactly. It's everything that you're saying is common sense and logic. And I suppose the only thing is, and like you said about sitting in a car, and now they're looking at driverless vehicles and everything, and it will come. Of course, it will come. It's just taking that extra step. But once it becomes norm, people will look back and they think, my goodness me, why didn't we do it a lot earlier? So from the old days of chitty chitty bang bang, when everybody thought it was crazy for a car to fly, to be able to go up and fly will just become second nature to the next few generations.
Yeah,
now,
it will.
With that in mind, when do you anticipate that the cargo operation will start?
Well, we are aiming for 2026. So that's what we try to do. And first, of course, also, depending on the country, as I said, there is countries which are more open to changing the regulations, at least a little bit, since we are, a helicopter, and we are going mainly in altitude somewhere between 500 to 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Because this is an airspace which usually is not used except for emergency helicopter stuff like that, because below, you have all the small drones, the fireworks and stuff. So there's a level at about 400 feet. And then above 1,000 feet, usually you have all the other air traffic, right? But there is this nice airspace here in Europe. They are already thinking about setting up what they call U spaces, which are more or less 3-dimensional roads in the sky, just like the Victor Airways, which the Americans have. And that's, they set this air streets there, so that you can fly there. And, setting up first, it's going to be what they call a sandbox, with all the necessary companies being part of this infrastructure, and to learn together. And then, from one place, adopted to different other places, and then from there you spread all over, and then from there you grow. So that's the idea. Doing it with the cargo version in order to mitigate technical risks, the financial risks, but also, of course, all the regulatory risks. And once everybody feels comfortable and says, okay, this is really something which works, then you can expand it, and then you also can go for transporting people.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I can't wait. I was just going to say to you, and then I take it that, from the human side of it, that's going to be a couple of years later.
Yes. So we think about, 1.5 to 2 years after we have started the commercial application of the cargo version, then there is also going to be for passengers.
Yeah.
So, think about it. the car 120 years ago
Yeah.
really changed the mindset of people, right? Before that, people, they couldn't really leave because at that 90% of the people were working in the agricultural area industry. And, they could leave their farm about how far they could walk, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they had a rather small horizon. And once the cars came up, they could suddenly really travel to distant places, and it really changed their mindset. It opened people's minds, right? And
Yeah.
imagine, flying in one of these Ecopters, not at an altitude of 35,000 feet, like a large airliner looking out a very tiny window, but really sitting in it and you see your city below you. This is actually changing your mindset, right? It really shows what you are capable of. So this is, I think, also not only from a traffic point of view or from a monetary point of view or for a time saving point of view, but also from a attitude point of view, really improving and really pushing the people's mindset.
Yeah, my God, yes, it is indeed. And it's going to be, I mean, I'm just thinking to myself now, 2 years' time, you've already covered one question. I can fit in there because I'm just about less than 200 kilos. Would I do it? I'd happily give it a go.
Well, once the people are going to travel with this, of course, it's just like with everything else. Society, there is the innovators, then there is the early adopters.
Yeah.
And innovators is 2%, early adopters is about 15% of the population. Also differs from country to country. Then there is the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggards, right? And in the beginning, just like with electric cars, it is the innovators and the early adopters who are going to buy or who are going to fly, with our aircraft. And in the beginning, we said, okay, let's say 2 plus the 15%, 17%, but let's say it's only 15%.
Yeah.
And 10% out of these 15%, 1.5% of the population are going to use this in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And all the others, all the 98.5 don't do it because they are afraid and they say, okay, let's look and whatsoever. But as I mentioned Riyadh before, right?
Yeah.
And they are very open-minded. They have a very young population. They are drowning in traffic. And they're going to be about 10 million next year. So 1.5% is 150,000 people. Now imagine 150,000 people using this every day, twice a day, going to and from work, for example, right? Going back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's going to be 300,000 flights with only 1.5% of the people. And and as I said, one aircraft can substitute 10 cars. So it's 300,000 divided by 10. So we would be talking about 30,000 aircraft.
Yeah, no, it's and I lived in Riyadh. So I know exactly about the traffic. So
Yeah.
I would definitely jump in one.
Yeah. As I said, when I was at LEAP 3 weeks ago, I was talking to, a Riyadi, and I was telling him the same thing, the same calculation. And he said, you know what? 5 years ago, when women were allowed to drive cars in Riyadh, right? In the beginning, it was only a very few women who said, okay, I'm going to drive myself. But then, all the other women saw, well, there is one. And the neighbor said, she's driving, so let's give it a try. And it took about 3 to 6 months since the mindset changed and pretty much all the women started to drive also, right? So and that's exactly the same thing what's going to happen with us, right? Once people see that this is working, that it is safe, that they are saving time, that it's faster, it's more comfortable, it's actually safer, especially in Riyadh because they drive like crazy, right? So so then it is to the benefit of everyone, and I think that's a good thing.
But I think you're on a winner there as well, because the one thing in Saudi now is, everybody's embracing all of the change, and it's such a young, like you said, a young population. So I think if anywhere, you've got great opportunity there.
They are well educated, they're open-minded, they have a very high affinity to new technical innovations. So that's
and also the weather's a lot more stable as well, which I would imagine, you get a lot of cross and a lot of wind problems, that would slow things up. So, it's a lot more stable.
Yeah, that's true. On the other hand, of course, the heat is going to be a challenge.
Yes,
So.
weight-wise. Yeah, yeah. But listen, I wish you great success. We'll definitely stay in touch and get some updates. But I think what you're doing is incredible. And one other thing that we spoke about earlier on was about standardized charging connectors, which I think is important. There's nothing more frustrating than what's gone on with the telephones, the mobile phones, and all the different chargers. Absolute ridiculous. So if that can be standardized, then brilliant.
Yeah. So, we are also concerning the charging, working together with a company. It's called EasyLink. It's EASE Link. And they are a company working on a conductive charging system for the automotive industry, because the automotive industry is, tackling the same problems. And also the advantage with using this technology is that, you get the industrialized product for a very attractive price, and you can be sure that this is actually really tested for all kind of things which you have to think about if you want to do such a charging system. And it's and that's what we are aiming for, so that once the aircraft lands, this charging connector automatically gets down from the bottom of the aircraft, connects with the charging pad on the stationary side, and then we can charge up to about 42, 43 kilowatt DC. So in having a 34 kilowatt hour battery where we use 75%, the rest is for spare. So to fully charge it is going to take approximately 45 minutes. But we know that most of the flights, most of the legs are going to be about only 10, 15, probably 25 kilometers. So we don't have to fully charge the battery, but we keep the state of charge somewhere between 40 to 80%. And then the charging takes on average approximately 10 minutes, which would be the turnaround time if someone lands, gets out, unbuckles, takes the luggage with him, and then the next person comes, sits in, and so on. And during this turnaround time, you actually recharge the battery to such a state of charge that you can continue with your next flight. So that's the
idea. Great. Well, it's an awful lot to look forward to. And as I said, we wish you great success, Jürgen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And it's innovators like yourselves, that are going to make the world a much better place as we move forward. And, youngsters today, what a wonderful, wonderful future is in store.
Yeah, so that's the idea, improve the situation. And thank you very much for the opportunity talking to you.
That's great. Well done, you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.